So, good afternoon and welcome everyone to this web session being organized by ICMAI Social Auditors Organization on the topic Social Impact Assessment, wherein we're going to talk about the framework and tools for carrying out social impact assessment. This is in line with the series of programs that we have been organizing over the last few days under the aegis of knowledge enhancing competency building series, and we intend to continue organizing these special programs in future also. Thank you so much for joining in on this particular web session on social impact assessment framework and tools. Social impact assessment is an important aspect of the overall social project planning, monitoring, and evaluation. Anytime that the government or the corporates or any civil service society plans a social project, it is very, very vital that someone should carry out social impact assessment not only once, but from time to time midway, with a view to finding out and evaluating how the project is progressing. Is it as per the plan? Are the resources being utilized in a most optimum, most efficient manner? What is the impact at the ground level in terms of the likely benefits and, of course, also the likely costs that are involved in implementing that particular project? And therefore, social impact assessment becomes a very, very useful exercise for all kinds of social projects implemented at the ground level. Social impact assessment is a systematic process of evaluating the potential consequences or impacts of the project's policies, programs, intervention, or developments undertaken by an implementation agency. It involves carrying out a study and understanding how the interventions, how the social project or program is likely to affect and impact the individuals, the communities at the localized level, and also the society and the nation as a whole. Every project which is conceived as a social project or a social intervention may have both positive social impacts and also possibly likely negative social impacts to a certain extent. Their significance, their degree, and the likelihood of that impact may vary from project to project. But then the idea of social impact assessment is to carry out evaluation of the potential social consequences, both positive and negative, with a view to managing the social project most appropriately in the most desirable manner and try and eliminate, and if not possible, mitigate any adverse negative effects or impacts arising out of the social project. Social impact assessment includes the processes of collection of data, analysis of data, monitoring of the project while it is being implemented, evaluation of the project once the project gets implemented at the ground level, and then managing the intended and unintended social consequences, both positive and negative. Some of the outcomes that you will notice, some of the impacts that will actually be experienced might even be unintended. That's because when a project is conceived or when a project is planned before implementation starts, it is not possible to really fathom out and understand both intended and unintended social consequences, which may later become a reality or may arise at the ground level. And that's what is the critical information thrown up by the process and architecture of social impact assessment. Its primary purpose is to bring about a more sustainable and equitable biophysical and human environment. There are 16 thematic areas specified by SEBI as part of the architecture of social stock exchange. But each one of these areas, end of the day, they have the desired outcome and impact in terms of improving the overall human well-being. Of course, they may pertain to different thematic areas: education, sanitation, water, environment, healthcare, fine. But end of the day, the basic objective is that all these areas, which are thematic areas for social projects, should ultimately contribute to and enhance the overall human well-being, which is now the accepted yardstick even by the United Nations Development, that the real development happens for any country, any nation, when the quality of the life of the people improves, or when there is overall human well-being which is enhanced by way of a social intervention or social project. When we carry out social impact assessment, it is not only looking at the economic considerations, but it focuses on looking at the overall impact that the project is going to make at the ground level on the people, on the biodiversity, on the environment, and culminating in creating an environment of a comparatively better quality of life for the people impacted by that particular social project. And that's the real objective of any social project: enhancing overall human well-being by means of a planned social intervention, social project, or social program. Social impact assessment can be carried out at very many different levels, but as social auditors, we are all primarily concerned with project level social impact assessment. That's because a social impact assessment report is required to be generated by way of an impact assessment carried out by social auditors every year, but that's mandatory only for those projects of those organizations which have gone in for listing or raising of funds from the social stock exchange. If a social organization only gets registered, doesn't move to the next level of listing, then no social impact assessment is required for that particular organization. Of course, that organization will have to submit a self-appraisal or a self-impact assessment report, but that's not required to be carried out by a qualified social auditor. When the company moves to the next level of getting listed and raising funds from the platform of social stock exchange, in that case, it is only social impact assessment would be required for a particular project of that organization, not the entire organization, but for that particular project for which the funding was raised by using and leveraging the platform of social stock exchange. So in our context, project level social impact assessment is relevant as an idea. This type of assessment is conducted for specific projects or social interactions and actions. It focuses on identifying and assessing the potential social impacts of the project, intended, unintended, positive, negative, with a view to be able to manage that project better by way of developing appropriate strategies to eliminate or mitigate negative impacts and to enhance and further the positive impacts arising out of that particular social project or social intervention. So our focus as social auditors is on project level social impact assessment. By identifying the likely impacts while the project is being implemented, during the course of implementation of the social project, it helps in improving decision making, and it also helps in providing to the implementation agency ways and means as to how we should proceed in that project with a view to ensuring that we get satisfactory impact results and the outcomes are as per the desired roadmap. And also that any harm, negative impact expected out of the implementation of that project, we should try to mitigate the negative impact or the harm and maximize the benefits from a specific planned social intervention or related activity. That is why SEBI has decided to mandate carrying out a social impact assessment for all those projects which are listed on the social stock exchange. For that particular specific project, every year a social impact assessment will have to be carried out by social auditors. So what is the theory and the frameworks which are available for carrying out social impact assessment? Some of the common frameworks relating to social impact assessment are the theory of change, which is a framework often used in the social sector to assess whether a project or program is achieving its or delivering its desired outcomes or not. It involves mapping out all the activities and inputs that are necessary to achieve a particular outcome. At the same time, it also carefully looks at the various assumptions and the underlying premises which underpin the basic planning methodology of that social project. Every project is going to have a basic action plan. And with action plan, we will also have different stages during the implementation of that particular project. And at each one of the stage in the process of implementation of the project, we would also have various inputs which will go into the project with a view to ensuring that the project progresses during the phases of implementation towards its completion and towards its implementation. At the same time, along with the inputs and the activities required at different stages through the planning and the implementation project, we also got to identify what are the expected outcomes, not only at the end of the project, which may take maybe even in some cases few years to be really reflected on the ground, but we also are concerned with starting with the output to outcome to impact as to how that's likely to rise by way of a particular social project or a social intervention. Connected to the theory of change is the logical framework approach, which helps to ensure that all the stakeholders have a clear understanding of the objectives and the expected outcomes of a social project. Logical framework involves stakeholders right from the beginning, right from the time you decide or conceive the idea of implementing a social project and then go and carry out a baseline survey or a need assessment study right from that level, ultimately to the point in time when the project gets implemented on the ground. You got to carefully, consistently, continuously engage with the various stakeholders so as to make sure that they have a clear understanding of the objectives and the expected outcomes. And because of that buy-in from the stakeholders, this is actually going to help you in delivering the project, implementing the project most appropriately on a most reasonable, appropriate manner. Another approach that we normally follow, or the framework that's used in social impact assessment, is outcome mapping, which focuses on tracking and understanding the changes that take place at the ground level as a result of a social project, which may be reflected, culminated in terms of changes in behavior, changes in relationships, actions of individuals, groups, organizations, both those who are involved in a social program and also those who are impacted by a social project or social intervention. Have the people thinking, mindset, behavior, had that undergone a change as a result of implementation of a new project? That's the kind of thing that we try to map by looking at outcome mapping framework for social impact assessment. Of course, it is a participatory process. You can't do this sitting in your office. You got to go down to the field, talk to various stakeholders who are directly or indirectly concerned or impacted by your project, or maybe even those stakeholders who can probably influence the outcomes arising out of a particular project. You got to reach out to them, involve, engage with the stakeholders, and it's a process of iterative learning. You go and meet some stakeholders, get their feedback, get their views, come back, change your approach, change your planning, change your implementation strategy, look for the result for a few months, few weeks, then again go back and talk to them. It's a reiterative, iterative learning process, constantly trying to adapt your strategies with a view to achieving the desired outcomes from a social project or intervention. Social return on investments, which is a framework that assesses the social, economic, and environmental outcomes of a project against the costs involved in planning and implementation of a social intervention. It is similar to financial ROI, return on investment, but the difference lies in the fact that social return on investment takes into account non-financial factors also, and it can be used to assess both direct as well as indirect impacts that may happen or accrue as a result of implementation of a social project. Many a time, there could be a project which may involve very many different complex issues. Multi-criteria analysis is a very useful framework that can be applied to those projects wherein there are multiple complex issues, social, economic, environmental, and this involves providing different weightages to the different criteria falling within each one of these subsets of social, economic, and environmental objectives, and then trying to figure out how the project is faring in its overall context. Maybe it has more positive outcomes in terms of environmental dimension. Maybe some other project has more favorable outcomes in terms of social dimensions, doesn't matter, but by providing weightages to the different multiple dimensions involved in one single project, it helps you provide a holistic picture or a holistic view as to how the project is actually functioning and contributing to overall development of the human well-being. Cost benefit analysis is where we try to compare what are likely to be the benefits of a project. Some of these benefits could be direct. Some of the benefits likely to arise out of a project could be indirect. Some of these benefits could be measurable in quantitative terms, whereas in case of some of the positive benefits, it may be, I won't say not possible, but probably difficult or a challenge as to how to quantify those benefits. But then it involves comparing what are the different costs and what are the different benefits which are involved in a particular project, balancing the two together, carrying out a CBA, assess whether the benefits of a social project or policy, do they outweigh the costs or not? Cost benefit analysis can be used to assess both financial as well as non-financial impacts. These are few key frameworks for carrying out social impact assessment. A framework is a kind of an approach or an overall thinking on the part of the social impact assessor as to how exactly he's going to go about doing his particular job of carrying out social impact assessment. And that's where you got to look at carefully, understand, rather, I should say, you should master the understanding of theory of change, logic framework, outcome mapping, SROI, multi-criteria analysis, and cost-benefit analysis. With proper understanding of these frameworks, you'll be in a better position to plan how to carry out social impact assessment of a particular project within a social, cultural, or environmental domain. So there are key social impact categories. For example, if you're looking for identifying or assessing impact on community, what is the impact of a particular social project or intervention on the community as a whole? So you may actually be looking at physical infrastructure development. You may actually possibly also look at the dimension of access to community services or also capacity building of the various institutions. How would you measure? How would you plan identifying the positive social impact? What could be the criteria? Constructing a community library that provides access to books, educational resources, computer facilities, promoting literacy, knowledge sharing, community learning. So you construct a community hall in a particular area, and that facilitates knowledge sharing, promoting literacy, and creating educational resources and help further the concept of community learning. If you're looking for negative social impact of a community project, if you're looking for constructing a factory near a residential area, this will result in increased pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, even water pollution. It will lead to environmental contamination, and that will also lead to health risks for the community as a whole. When you carry out social impact assessment, you've got to check out what is the level at which you're trying to assess the impact. It could be at the level of community. It could be at the household level. It could also be at the level of an individual. It could also be at the level of certain institutions or certain groups of people. If you're looking at impact of a project on population demographics and characteristics, you probably need to focus on changes in population size, impact on birth rate, impact on mortality rate. You can probably look at how the demographics of a particular place is undergoing a change in terms of gender composition or age distribution. The positive impact of a healthcare program would be it would reduce infant mortality rates. It will improve the overall health and well-being of the people in that area. Whereas the development project undertaken in a particular region, which may lead to loss of social ties, cultural identity, and disruption of community cohesion. All projects, for that matter, would have certain positive impacts and certain negative impacts. End of the day, the implementation agency needs to take a call and decide to go ahead with a particular project only if the positive impact outweighs the negative impacts. And that's the case virtually in practically all types of social projects. When you're looking at building social equity by way of enhancing power of the people, empowering societies, then possibly you can check out, has there been any increase in access to decision-making processes? Are the people of a particular area, region, are they now participating in decision-making process which they were not being involved hitherto? Is the social network being strengthened further? Are people coming together, getting together, discussing, interacting with each other more and more as compared to earlier? And does it lead to empowerment of marginalized groups? These could be some of the aspects or dimensions of impact assessment in case of social projects. Establishing a community-based organization that advocates for the rights of marginalized populations, fostering social inclusion, promoting equitable representation is a big positive from the social or the overall community point of view. But on the other hand, implementing policies and programs that disproportionately benefit a particular social or political group or which lead to increase in social inequalities and which further marginalize vulnerable communities, obviously that's having a negative impact on that particular society segment or that particular community. You got to weigh out whether positive social impact is more as compared to the negative impact of that particular social project or not, and then take a call how the social project is actually impacting that particular area, impacting that particular population group. When you want to check out what are the changes taking place at the individual or the household level as a result of a social project, then you check out in terms of economic well-being. Generally speaking, has the standard of living of the people improved over a period of time? And of course, also, do the family people or persons of that particular household, do they now have better access to education and health? And overall, does it lead to social empowerment in general or not? For example, a social project involving vocational training, the positive impact would be it will lead to improved employability and with that improved income levels of the individual and the households, and thereby improving the economic well-being of the individuals and their families. But on the other hand, implementing a project that displaces people from their homes without proper resettlement support, this will result in social and economic hardships for those individuals and families which are going to be impacted, affected by a particular social project. Community resources. You can check out natural resource management as a result of a particular project. Has it added to the social capital pool? Has it provided access to clean water, sanitation to the people of a particular area? Has the project helped in improving environmental conservation in that area or not? Suppose you develop a community garden and you promote sustainable agriculture. This will have a positive impact in terms of enhancing food security within that community, and also in a way also provide economic well-being to the people because of different alternate avenues of income generation for the people of that area as a result of this community asset creation. But on the other hand, exploiting natural resources would cause deforestation, would lead to loss of biodiversity, and would also lead to disruption of ecological balance. So, how to measure social impact, or what are the methods of measuring social impact? Social impact measurement refers to the process of assessing, quantifying, and evaluating the outcomes of interventions, programs, policies, initiatives on social problems, issues, and challenges. The process of measuring social impact involves systematically collecting data, analyzing the data, interpreting the data, and then forming an understanding with regard to the social changes that are taking place or social changes which are manifesting in that particular region or among those particular group of people who are being directly or indirectly impacted or affected by a social project. So before you actually get started with social impact measurement, you got to probably sit down and answer a few questions yourself. You must check out what positive or negative social changes have occurred as a result of this intervention. To what extent have the intended social outcomes been achieved? What are the factors which have contributed to the observed impact? And then, of course, how can the social intervention be improved or optimized for further enhancing the social impact? This is the mindset. This is the frame of your mind when you actually go to a site to carry out social impact assessment. You must keep these 4 bullets in your mind very, very clearly. You're going there for a purpose, and the purpose is to check out what are the positive or negative changes that have occurred as a result of this particular social project, to what degree social outcomes have been achieved, what are the factors that have contributed to this impact, and how do I improve the social impact still further? What else can I do with a view to bringing about optimization and enhanced social impact in that particular area? Coming down to specifics as to how do we measure a social impact, and trying to provide you examples, some ideas to what kind of indicators can be used to measure social impact. Social impact metrics, some of the examples could be, if you're checking out education, maybe you can look at literacy rate. If you're in the domain of health, you can probably check out mortality rate and the birth rate. If you're looking at employment dimension, compare that as against unemployment rate. And if you're looking at gender equality, you can probably look at proportion of people getting employed in work gender-wise. Not only that, going beyond, what is the diversity, divergence in the gender pay, which is technically called the gender pay gap. You have to then collect the data to understand the patterns, trends, and of course, the interrelationship between the intended and the observed outcomes. And for that, you got to make use of both quantitative data as well as qualitative data. Quantitative data still comparatively easy to handle because there are lots of books on statistics, operation research, research methodology available in the marketplace, which provide you a lot of guidance how the data should be collected, how the sample should be identified. But then using that data for inferring the impact of the outcome of a social project involves understanding of the patterns, trends, and the relationship between the various multiple factors or multiple dimensions involved in a social project, and that's what is the most critical part of data analysis. Data collection happens by way of you may actually carry out a survey using a questionnaire. You can may also go for one-on-one interviews or a focus group interviews. You can also probably simply decide to visit the project, visit the location, spend a few hours there, just wandering around, just sitting around, just talking to people, observing what is happening at the ground level. That's also a hugely effective technique and approach for data collection or getting a sense of what is actually happening at the ground level in terms of output, outcome, and impact. We can also use attribution and counterfactual social impact analysis. This analysis involves comparing the outcomes with the plausible alternate scenario where the intervention did not occur. In other words, we're trying to find out what would have been the case if this project was not undertaken, not implemented in this particular region. This is what has happened, either positive or negative, whatever, or both the dimensions would always be there in a project. But trying to figure out what would have been the scenario, what would have been the life of the people living in this geography if this project was not implemented, if this social intervention had not taken place. In other words, we're trying to figure out insights into the contribution of a particular social intervention. How a particular social project or intervention has actually contributed to making the life of the people better, improving environment, improving social equity, is by carrying out counterfactual social impact analysis. Theory of change, social return on investment, logic framework. After having identified, properly understood the various approaches and frameworks for carrying out social impact assessment, end of the day, you actually got to apply all this. And for that, you use various social impact assessment tools. The first step or the first level would be to carry out stakeholder analysis. You got to first of all identify the relevant stakeholders who you would like to contact, get in touch with a view to finding out their feedback, their views with regard to a particular project, and that's called stakeholder mapping. Stakeholder mapping could be across gender, across age groups, literate, illiterate, employed, unemployed. I mean, it can have very many different dimensions, but then you got to be careful that you include all those people in your sample, cutting across gender, cutting across various other dimensions, so that you are able to have a reasonably reflective, representative sample to be able to work out your social impact assessment. Stakeholder analysis involves identifying all stakeholders connected with the social project, mapping their relationships to the project. Some of the stakeholders may be directly connected. Some of the stakeholders may be indirectly connected. Some of the stakeholders may not be either directly or indirectly connected to a social project, but they may have the power to influence the outcome or impact of a project. You got to be very, very careful dealing with those kind of people, dealing with those set of people, but very critical as part of the overall social impact assessment work. Stakeholder analysis helps organizations understand the perspectives of different stakeholders, and it helps to bring them closer and involve them in the overall decision making process. And this buy in, which results as a result of stakeholder engagement, ultimately helps better implementation of the project, better outcome, and better impact. Then you may decide to carry out impact assessment surveys. And you can use very many different techniques. This can happen online, this can happen by way of a questionnaire. You can also probably use your telephone to carry out surveys. It could be face-to-face interviews. It's an effective tool for gathering quantitative data as well as qualitative data. When you talk to a person one-on-one, or when you talk to a few people in a group at one point of time, it's not only that you are hearing what they are saying, but you're also observing their facial expressions, their body language, and that tells you a lot more as what is conveyed by the real words coming out of their mouth. It really gives you deep insights into their feelings with regard to a particular project or social intervention. You can very effectively use focus groups, which are group of individuals representing stakeholder categories who are likely to be affected or impacted by a proposed project. And these are moderated by a social impact assessor, where you can get a fairly good understanding of their perceptions, their attitudes, their opinions regarding a project. And it's a very, very useful technique to get insights with regard to a new social intervention or project. Then you got to also carry out impact mapping. Impact mapping is a visual tool used to identify and understand the potential impact of a project on surrounding community and environment. This is surrounding community and environment. People living in a particular area in immediate vicinity may be very, very happy about a particular project. But please go 5 kilometers away, go 10 kilometers beyond this periphery of geography, check out with people there what is the impact that they are experiencing as a result of particular social project. Check out their perceptions, their feelings, and likely impact on their life as such. Impact mapping is an effective tool for identifying potential impacts, both positive and negative, and then developing strategies to either eliminate or mitigate negative impacts and enhance the positive impacts likely to arise out of a social project. These are some of the specialized, slightly technical social impact measurement tools. My idea of sharing them with you here on this slide is not to provide you a detailed description of each one of these tools. Maybe I'll have another session where I can deal with this, but right now the idea is only to familiarize you with these social impact measurement tools, which are very, very effective, being used by World Bank, being used by various other international agencies for carrying out social impact assessment of various social projects being implemented across the world. Randomized controlled trials, difference in differences, difference within a difference, propensity score matching, synthetic control method. These are some of the specialized, slightly technical social impact measurement tools. Just check out from the Google. If you have inclination, if you want to study them in deep detail, you will get to know how effective they are in terms of their implementation and carrying out social impact assessment. Social impact assessment imperatives. SIA involves a thorough identification of the people residing or working within a project's area of influence. It includes mapping of the communities and their social, economic, and cultural connection with the project, and it includes listing of various social issues which must be considered even before a project is planned and also right through the journey of the project across various stages and various phases of its implementation. But I think what is most important is before implementing any new social project, we must carry out and we must have data of social baseline that indicates the current status of the problem on the ground at the time when the social intervention or social project was being conceived. What is the situation? What is the baseline data saying at the time when the project is being conceived or planned? So that later we can check out what has been the result, what has been the outcome and impact of a social intervention in terms of bringing about change in the lives of the people as reflected by various measurement key indicators. That's how we can identify whether a particular social intervention or social project has been useful, beneficial for the people or not. So how do you obtain baseline data? We understand that baseline data is what is available before a new social intervention or project is conceptualized or even planned, implemented. This data can be accessed, can be built up by review of secondary data, data which is already available, data which is already published. And these secondary sources of data involve a desktop study. Sit down on a laptop or a computer on your table, look at different sources of data, and then try and work out what is the current situation in that particular geography, in that particular demographic population group. And you can check out data from various official government sites, CMIE, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. You can check out RBI website. You can check out Niti Aayog. You can check out websites of different ministries. All this is going to be used. Invest India is a useful site to check out the various data relating to developmental activities happening within the country. You can also look at research reports and other available documentation on demographic trends within the country, also the history and culture of the people and the topography of the area where the social project is planned to be implemented. The use of secondary sources is a good starting point to understand what is the current situation in that area, in that population group before the project is conceived and planned and implemented. However, the use of secondary material alone is not going to be sufficient. You will also have to probably supplement this by way of carrying out original research, and that will provide to you what is known as primary data. You may carry out a field survey to fully establish an appropriate social baseline and also to update information that may no longer be current. By accessing secondary sources of data, you may come out or come across a report from Planning Commission, the erstwhile Planning Commission, a report of 2012. Well, when you try and do field survey and you derive certain results, you may come to a conclusion the report of 2012 generated by the erstwhile Planning Commission is no longer current, is no longer relevant, is no longer validated. That's because a lot of things have changed over a period of last 12 years in the country, and therefore the earliest report available may not be good enough for you to be able to establish the social baseline. You need to also involve yourself in public consultation, which plays a critical role in raising awareness about the project's impacts. It helps you to gain confidence, involvement of the people in the project, and that ultimately helps you to be able to maximize the potential positive impacts of a project and reduce its likely intended or unintended negative consequences. As we were discussing earlier, social impact assessment requires you to use both qualitative as well as quantitative data. Quantitative data is still easier to handle. You have various statistical techniques of carrying out data analysis. You can use ANOVA, you can use a t-test, you can use f-test, you can use correlation analysis, you can do regression analysis, you can do trend analysis. But when it comes to qualitative assessment of a project, the methods are difficult, not so robust, at best random. It all depends upon the judgment of the social impact assessor, how exactly is going to measure the qualitative aspects of a social project. Because qualitative methods are concerning with perception of the people, that is, how they view themselves and the world around. Qualitative interview techniques are very, very specialized, which are used to provide insight into community and demographic groups. Qualitative surveys can be used to obtain descriptive information on social differentiation, social conflict, role of women, resource issues, and local perceptions about the project, and much more. In a way, the qualitative data and the qualitative data analysis methods help you to supplement your analysis carried out on quantitative data. So qualitative methods serve to enhance and verify quantitative data which you may have collected vice versa or otherwise by way of using various other techniques of collecting data. Well, there is a general myth prevailing and surrounding around social impact assessment. Some of us believe that social impacts cannot be measured. Well, let's not go by your sweeping statements. It may be a difficult task as compared to carrying out a statutory audit, internal audit, a management audit, but nonetheless, one can always find a relevant indicator which is going to be best suited for a particular project, depending upon its nature, depending upon its dimensions. It may be qualitative, quite possible. Maybe you're looking at perception of health risks arising out of polluted groundwater. It may be quantitative when you're probably looking at number of teachers required in a particular area to raise literacy levels, or to check out population influx to a destination tourist facility. But then in each one of these cases, we can figure out and we can work out an indicator. Many of us believe that probably SEBI or some other agency should come out with a standardized list of key indicators for different dimensions of social impact assessment for different thematic areas. Well, let me clarify, and this is my perception, that it is possibly not possible to have a standardized template which is going to work and provide you key indicators relating to all the various 16 thematic areas specified by SEBI. Of course, you can have 8, 10, 12 key parameters or key metrics which are going to be relevant across different thematic areas, but over and above these 10, 12 key common indicators, each thematic area will require consideration of specific ideas, specific dimensions, specific factors, which are then going to reflect the impact that a project would have created on the ground level, depending upon which kind of thematic area you are actually looking at. So social impact measurement is possible, definitely possible. You can always try and find out a key relevant indicator for every kind of a project in those 16 thematic areas. Yes, in some of the cases, the key indicator may not be quantitative, it may actually turn out to be qualitative. No issues. You can still work out a reasonably practical, workable solution of identifying a key relevant indicator and then measuring the performance of that particular project by way of impact assessment with regard to what are the impacts which are happening on the ground level with regard to functioning of a social project or social intervention. Let me give you some examples. One of the points mentioned in the 16 thematic areas concerns promoting healthcare, including mental health care, sanitation, making available safe drinking water. If you are carrying out social impact assessment of any project within this dimension, what could possibly be some of the common, reasonably okay evaluation parameters? You can check out availability, location, capacity of hospitals, primary hospitals, multi-speciality hospitals, mobile medical vans. Are they available, not available? Provision of required equipment, facilities. Someone is very, very critical ill. Is it possible to treat that person then there within an area of domain of say 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, or will he have to be transported to a far-flung area? Provision of mobile healthcare units. Are health camps being organized from time to time by various organizations there in that area or not? What is the cost of healthcare tests and treatment? What is the quality of healthcare facilities available in that area? And very important, do people living in that area have access to those healthcare facilities or not? A corporate might have built up and constructed a hospital and made it a condition that these medical facilities can be used only by employees and their families of that particular corporate. There is a hospital, no doubt. So when you check out the first bullet, availability, location of medical facility, there is a hospital, but people of that area do not have access because this is being restricted only for the employees and the families of that particular corporate. Counseling, treatment for mental health care, very important. This has been put in the heading of that particular 1 to 16 thematic areas by the government, and therefore government is very, very critically aware about the importance of the treatment of mental health, prevention of mental and physical stress, patients, doctors, facilities assessment, water-related ecosystem. Do we have water purification plants in that locality? What is the profile of the various beneficiaries? What is the regional and geographical coverage provided by that particular social project? Going by the baseline survey, what was the sanitation hygiene level? How it has changed as a result of a social project or social intervention? How do you create awareness for sanitation and hygiene? Are people in that area not having adequate nutrition? Then you got to check out assessing malnutrition levels. How do people manage the waste and how it is being disposed? Any kind of R&D effort happening in sanitation domain? Is it possible to leverage new technologies, including IT, in this domain and to ensure that there is equitable access and distribution of healthcare, sanitation, and safe drinking water amongst the people living in that particular area? Another example, if you're looking at a project in the domain of eradicating hunger, poverty, malnutrition, and inequality, then some of the dimensions you must focus on with a view to getting information collected, analyzed, inferred upon. Access to food. What is the logistic architecture for procurement, storage, transportation, and delivery of food supplies? Provision of sufficient, nutritionally adequate, wholesome, and safe food. What is the kind of advocacy which is happening Are there some awareness campaigns to eradicate hunger, poverty, and malnutrition in the target area? Is some effort being made to improve capacity building of the farmers and other extended functionaries in agriculture? Do you tell people about sustainable agriculture? Are they aware about that? Do they know what are the sustainable food production, storage, and distribution practices? How do you deal with the problem of food wastage? Is your supply chain with regard to food is efficient or not? What is the input use efficiency and resource conservation, and to what extent technology is being deployed to improve upon the input use efficiency and resource conservation? Quality of soil, resilience of that particular area to climate change. Is that particular area prone to extreme weather, drought, flooding, and other contingencies? How do you prevent, control, and manage infectious diseases? How do you improve land and soil quality? How do you provide care for the vulnerable, marginalized people? Do you raise and run awareness campaigns and align programs to eradicate hunger, poverty, and inequality? How do we ensure universal access to all public facilities? Government says lot is being done in practically entire country, all districts, all states, all gram panchayats, lot of actions is being taken, but somebody has to just go to the ground level and find out. Facilities are available, but are they universally accessible to all or not? And there is a growing problem of migration and mobility of people happening. People are moving from villages, from rural areas, moving to cities, moving to urban areas, and that's changing the entire demographics of the country as well as the work practices. How do we help people stay back in those areas, get gainful employment, reduce hunger, poverty, inequality in the area where they are staying? Don't allow them to migrate to cities which are already overburdened with population, and cities are, bursting at their seams. They don't really have the capacity to be able to absorb more people coming from villages and the rural areas. Do you have some kind of social protection programs running in that geography, and whether employment and asset generation programs are being run or not? The point is, these were just the pointers, some of the pointers which I showed to you by taking example of two different areas of thematic functioning as per the SEBI guidelines, those 16 principles that you got to adhere to. But the whole idea of looking at these particular practices are that once you start working in the domain of social impact assessment, 2 or 3 things we all got to know. We are all learning, We are all, as of now, in the learning phase. Some of us maybe a notch higher than the other person, but basically everyone is learning at this juncture, at this point in time. What is required is read a lot. There's a lot of material available on Google, read. But then besides reading, more confidence comes when you apply these readings, when you apply this knowledge in real life situation. Try and get connected with some kind of a social organization at your individual level. Maybe some of you may like the idea, some of you may not like the idea. Try and get involved with them on a pro bono basis. Don't expect to get a fee for it. You want to learn. Get associated with some social organization, NGOs nearby in the vicinity of the place where you're staying. Get involved, get to understand how they work, get to go to a project where they are working, and try and apply some of these frameworks and techniques and tools which we have talked about in today's session. And then slowly you will build up competency. As I said in the beginning, this is the knowledge sharing competency building session, which we have been running for the last few weeks and will continue to do the same going forward. The whole idea is to have one specific area discussed in each of the web sessions, which happens almost every 4 days, every 5 days, so that each one of you start building up your capacity. When the time comes for you to actually go to the ground and carry out the social impact assessment for a project, you would probably be better equipped, better prepared, more knowledgeable, and with confidence to be able to carry out your job to the best of your ability, to the satisfaction of all concerned. There is a question in the chat box here from CMA Rakesh Chaudhary, sir, who says that social cost return on investment and social cost return on investment index is required in social development, social comparative analytics, and social impact assessment. Very rightly mentioned, sir. I only mentioned about SROI, but he goes beyond SROI basic and he talks about social cost return on investment and social cost return on investment index. I would request Chaudhary sir to kindly elaborate on this a bit more for the benefit of us all. Over to Chaudhary sir.
Namaskar, Dr. S. K. Gupta ji, and all the members and delegates. Actually, I wanted to introduce the social cost return on investment and index for social impact assessment and all the indicators associated with all the impact assessment, the evaluation and the review of all the indicators. That has become very important now. So I wanted the views of all the members and yourselves also.
Sure, sir. So I think this is what the audience and the participants would go through this concept of social cost return on investment index. Maybe they may not be aware about this point of time, but definitely once you have pointed this out and you have given an idea that this is a very good indicator to be used for assessing impact of social project, I'm sure all of us are going to Google and check out as to what is this concept all about and improve our knowledge and improve our understanding of this concept going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So I thank all the participants for joining in this web session. Thank you so much for your patronizing various sessions being organized by ICMAI Social Auditors Organization, and we will continue to engage with you and provide you opportunity of knowledge sharing as well as competency building